Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Player First podcast. In today's episode, we wanted to talk to our players and our families out there about controlling the controllable, okay, and not focusing on things that you can't control, okay? There are so many things out there that are not in our control that can easily affect our confidence, all right? So we're specifically talking about how to just control the things we can control to control our confidence level. All right. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot that we can't control, which we're going to dive into. And we're going to talk about some ways that we can avoid falling into those traps that affect a player's confidence. But before we get going, Coach Leo, how is everything out there in the sunny UK?
Sunny UK. I wish, Coach Fernando. No, everything's going well. We've now started training. So the Football Domain Academy has recommenced training after lockdown 2. So we're back out onto the field, back in action, and we have our first game after lockdown. Our older boys this weekend. So good to be back out, and good to be back out in the cold, wintry weather.
You know, there we go.
It's not football if it's not cold.
There you go, especially in the UK, right?
Yeah. What about yourself, Fernando? I know we have similar weathers here.
Yeah. It's getting colder here as we're heading into the winter months now. So everything's sort of moving indoors, and you know, we're taking our precautions with COVID protocols and all that. So we're just hoping we don't go into another lockdown over here in New York, in sunny New York. So hopefully everything stays open and we can continue training and getting better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, today's episode, Coach Leo, we're talking to our players and our families about controlling the controllable and letting go of things that you can't control. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, you know, controlling the controllable, you know, what is it that you think of, I guess, or what are your first thoughts on this subject?
Great question. It's controlling the controllable is very difficult, especially as a human being, because we want to control everything, right? We want to control not only our emotions, but we also want to control what other people think and say and behave. A huge example is when you're driving. Okay, when you're in a car driving and you come across really bad drivers.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you get really, really mad. But what you have to remember is you can't control how that driver is driving, right? You can only control how you react. So that same example applies to sport and applies to soccer. Okay, when you're out on the field and you're in a game, you can only control your performance. You can't control how your teammates play or the decisions they make. That's down to them. But as a player, you can prepare for every situation. So if your teammate plays a really bad pass, okay, and you didn't expect it, that maybe the first time you get frustrated, but the second time that experience starts to kick in and you're going to be better prepared. Okay. But we have to remember as players and as athletes that you can only control what you can control, and that's you. That's your performance, right? So when you're out on the field, you have to give 100%. You have to work hard. And in situations, you have to do sometimes the job of 2 players. Okay, like if you're playing behind, I don't know, a midfielder, and you're the center back, and you see that midfielder that he doesn't drop to help you, especially when the other team is attacking, then you have to control how you react, and you have to say to yourself, right, how can I improve this situation?
Right.
Okay? So, and there could be a number of things, right? You can maybe talk to your teammate, or you can position yourself better on the field. Speak to your coach is another way of dealing with a situation similar. So we just have to remember as players that we can only control what we can control, and that's ourselves, right? That's our performance. That's how we react, and we have to go with that.
Yeah, I think that was perfectly well said. You know, as you mentioned, I love that analogy of driving down the road, and you can't control, unfortunately, how other people around you are driving, whether that be like maniacs or not. But you can only control how you react to those situations. And when things happen in life, it's not about things happening to you or at you. It's just the way things happen and being able to control your response to it, like you said, right? I think that's beautifully well put. And the more we can understand that as young people, the more easier it becomes to, you know, get past certain situations and certain moments that are a little bit more difficult. So, you know, I think there's several things that are within a player's environment that can affect their confidence that's not within their control. So one of the things that, you know, all players I know struggle with is, let's say in a match, there are numerous people in the area that can affect a player's confidence, such as the coach, the referee, the parents on the sidelines, which is a big one. It's definitely a big one in youth soccer and youth football. So, you know, how do players, I guess, take those distractions away and don't let those things affect them for their confidence, right? Because you cannot control what parents say. You cannot control what the referee does. You cannot control what your coach is going to do when they're going to put you in the game and things like that. So how do players learn to let go of those things so that they can overcome?
Yeah. I think there's a number of ways that you can overcome a situation like that. One that I speak to my players about is always think of the next play. Okay, so if you made a mistake, and this was an example with one of our goalkeepers that we have, our U12 boys goalkeeper. He made a massive blunder, which we laughed it off because I said it happens to all of us. But something I said to him is you just have to focus on the next play. Yeah. And if you focus on the next play you make it a success, then the last one you're going to forget about it. And that's how you build that confidence back up. You destroy your confidence when you overthink about the mistake. Okay, when you let that mistake just hold on to you for so long that you can't perform.
Yeah.
So that's my number one tip, would be just always focus on the next moment, right? The next play. If you misplace the pass, next time make sure you complete the pass. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the second one is make up the mistake as quickly as you can. All right. I know something you talked to your players about was I think, was it the 5 seconds that you have?
Yeah, the 5 second rule.
Yeah, the 5 second rule. Very similar to ours, which we say we have a rule, which is if we lose the ball, we have to win it back in 5 seconds. So it's the same with any sort of mistake that you make. Okay. Within 5 seconds, can we correct that mistake or do something minor that corrects what we just done?
Right.
And what happens is your mind begins to shift in the sense that you take responsibility for your actions, right? You take responsibility for what went well and what went bad. And also, because you're taking responsibility, you can make up for the mistake, right? The worst thing, and no one likes this, is when someone blames someone else for something, or excuses. No one likes someone that makes consistent excuses or that blames their teammates. No one likes that type of player, right?
Yeah.
Everyone likes that player that takes responsibility and makes up for their mistakes quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just thinking about players in their environment, there's going to be always parents out there on the sidelines that are going to be yelling and screaming and going to be excited. And, you can't let what's going on the sidelines, those external things, affect how you think about what's going on, right? You have to be so focused on, like you said, on the next play to just worry about your game and not worry about maybe what's coming from the sidelines. And sometimes, I think we've talked about this before, even coming from the coach's sideline as well, sometimes you just have to have the confidence in yourself to play your game and to just enjoy what you're doing and know that you know what you're doing out there, and avoid the noise that's coming from the sidelines. And also not worry about the referee, not worry about all those calls that he's making, whether you think they're fair or not. That's something that you can't control, right? You cannot control what the referee calls, but you can control, talking about controlling the controllable, you can control how you react to that referee's decision, right? So you can choose to get really upset and let it affect you, right? And let it affect you for the rest of the game. Or you can choose to quickly, like you said, great tip, focus on just the next play, just move on. Don't worry about it. Focus on the next play. Maybe you picked up a yellow card, for example, off of a tackle that you thought was perfectly clean, but the referee thought otherwise and gave you a caution, a yellow card. In that situation, right, many players would get very frustrated, and rightfully so, right? If you feel like you did nothing wrong and you're being penalized, you're going to get frustrated. But once you can choose to let that go one of two ways. You can let it affect you, right? Where now you're frustrated, you're upset, you're a little angry, and it starts affecting your game. You're not focused on the game anymore, but you're emotional now. And so you start playing, you start not playing your game, right? You start making mistakes that you don't normally make, and it just affects the rest of your performance.
Yeah.
Or you can choose to control how you react and just move on, focus on the next play. And I know that's so difficult to do in those moments because typically in a match, we're very emotional. It's a passionate game. So it's hard to sometimes remove the emotion, but you have to choose to move past that situation and control your reaction.
Absolutely. And it's a great point you just made about the emotional, because, you know, as you said, football, soccer is a very emotional sport, and your emotions will dictate how you recover from a certain setback.
Right.
Like if you let that mistake that you made affect you emotionally, then it's going to take you longer to recover. Yeah. However, if you don't react with emotion and you're like, oh, you know, I made a mistake, who cares? Let's move on.
Right.
You know, then you recover quicker. And both ways, you're still in control, you know, and that's the point of this episode, right? Control what you can control, and how you react, whether with emotion or without emotion, is in your hands.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Exactly. So, you know, no matter what's going on and what decisions and things are being said around you, you cannot control those things. Just control how you react, I think is the message here. But beyond that, you know, I think that's just one part of the things that happens, right, in the match, the things that are going on around you, the calls that are being made. But there's also the internal thoughts. I think the internal battle that happens within a player's mind, some thoughts that are coming up in their mind that can affect their confidence as well during a match. So I think this one's a tough one because a lot of players and a lot of us as humans, I think we tend to let our thoughts get the best of us sometimes. So as we're doing something, you know, some thoughts maybe start to creep in that aren't the most positive, or, you know, they're not helpful, right? There's always some bad lingering thoughts in there that come out in these moments. But again, it's choosing to react to those thoughts in a positive way. You can't always control the thoughts that come into your brain. You know, sometimes thoughts just come up, right? Feelings just happen sometimes. You don't control those things, but you could control how you choose to listen to those thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what did that make sense? First of all,
Yeah. 100% it makes sense. And, you know, your thoughts are probably everything. How you think about things is how you react to things.
And I'd argue how you choose to listen to your thoughts is more important.
You know, and that's something for another day. But you know, that's huge, especially for young people, right? Because young people, you know, they're constantly talking to themselves. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? Who should I follow? Should I listen to him? Should I listen to this person? Should I listen to myself? Constantly.
And these things just pop up in your brain, you know?
Yeah. So I think when you're out on the field, listening to yourself is the number one importance, right? Because you're out there. But also listening to the positive things you're saying to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're not self-destructing yourself in the middle of the field, which is, you know, we talked about 2 examples before we came on here live, of 2 kids that struggled and they self-destructed.
Right.
So, and I guarantee you those kids in their head, they were going through emotions, right? They were talking to themselves, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure, you know, and all of that. And it gets to the point, then you have a breakdown and then you can't play anymore because you're not focused. You know, the next pass becomes harder. That run into space that you should be doing, you don't make it because you're thinking about what I just did, like your mistakes. So the things you say to yourself are really important, not only on the field, but off the field as well.
Yeah, 100%. And then it's just choosing to let those, like you said, choosing to focus on the positive thoughts. And when those negative thoughts come, just choosing to understand that those aren't going to help you and let them go. Yeah. Right. Which is easier said than done, right? It's very difficult. It's very difficult to have that discipline to know what thoughts you should be listening to. But I think it's important for players to understand that you can't always control the thoughts that come into your mind. We all have positive thoughts. We all have negative thoughts. And just starting to become aware of your thoughts as a player and understanding that you don't have to listen to all of your thoughts, right? And that becomes difficult. That's a skill of itself, which, like you said, we could talk about that another day, but
that's it.
That's something that players, I think, can benefit from once they understand it. And so we have the external environment, right? The people around us that we can't control. We have our internal thoughts that sometimes we can't control. And then also things in our past, maybe some past results or things that happened in the past that we can't control. So, for example, maybe you're playing a team that you've played in the past and they dominated your team. They absolutely destroyed you guys, right? 5-0, right? It was a bloodbath, right? Utter domination. And you can choose to let that past result affect you now, right? But the real story is you can't control what happened in the past. And so why let it affect what's going to happen now? Right? Yeah. What are your thoughts there, Coach Leo? I got something ringing over here. Do you hear that? That's my fault. First time on the podcast this has happened.
That's cool. So
there we go.
That's a really, really important thing you just said, because especially in club soccer, right? Club soccer, we're so obsessed with results. Okay. And we tend to look at a team's results, and already we're judging how good that team is.
Right. It's funny you say that, because you'll talk to some coaches and they'll basically judge, and I know I used to do this. They'll judge the coming game based on that team's record. That, oh, this team's good. This team, they've won so many games, whatever, or they've scored so many goals. But sometimes that's the worst indicator, right? Because if you've never seen a team play, that doesn't mean that they're actually a good team. They may have just gotten very lucky in those games. Who knows?
Exactly.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's a great point. But yeah, it's true. As coaches, that's one thing we tend to do, is we look at the other team's results and we already judge how good that team is going to be.
Right.
But as you said, that's not the case, because the other team might have had a bad game, or the other team might have had only less amount of players. You never know.
They might have missed some players, right? So
anyway, I think in terms of a player going into a game where you got demolished 5-0, now I think 5-0 is respectable.
That's respectable to you?
Result. Come on, you've seen the results, right?
Compared to your score lines of 10-9, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. That's a low scoring game in
right.
our academy.
Like, what are you talking about? It's nothing.
So, but anyway, in all seriousness, so going into a game like that where you've already got beat heavily by the other team, that can create a fear factor.
Right.
Oh no, we're going to get beat again. If they beat us once, they're going to beat us twice. But that's not the way to look at things, because it's like when you, going back to driving, right? It's like when you do your driving test, you fail maybe the first time, but the second time it's the same driving test.
Right.
And you pass it.
Right.
Okay. It's the same, right? You're going to play the same team, but maybe they had a good game or a good day last time you played, but now it's a different day. It's a different situation. Now, this time you might beat them.
Right.
So we can't live in the past. We've always got to look into the future. And the truth is, if you're going to play another team again, that's an opportunity to win.
Yeah.
You should go, as a player, you should go into every situation, not just football, but, in life. It's the same in school, right? If you failed or you didn't get the grade you wanted in an exam, and you do that exam again, that doesn't mean you're going to get the same grade.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about preparation, right? How can we prepare a bit better?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same in soccer, right? If we're playing the same team, we know what to expect, but what can we do differently that we didn't do last game?
Yeah, that's 100% right. And that's the best way to use the past, is actually using it to learn, right? Okay, what can we do differently? What can we do better? But you don't want to let the negative of the past affect you now, because unfortunately you can't go back in the past and change the outcome, right? Or taking an individual example, I know this is something that we had talked about before we went live as well. If you miss an open goal, right, and you hit the post instead, and it goes out. I've
done many of those, Coach.
You know what, Coach? I'm not very surprised. Teasing. So a player that misses an open net, right? Even within the same game, let's say within the first few minutes of the game, they missed a wide open net. You can easily, as a player, choose to let that past result, that past event, affect the next chance that you get at goal.
Yeah.
Right. You can easily let that linger in your mind. And so the next time you get that open goal, you're already thinking about that you missed. So you think, oh, I'm going to miss again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you can't live, like you said, you can't live in the past. You have to let past results, let them be what they are. If you can use them to your advantage, use them to learn, use them to grow, to do things differently. But that's it. You have to leave those things in the past and move forward and know that today is a different opportunity. It's a different moment. It's different than the past.
Correct. Yeah. Love that.
With that said, though, Coach Leo, we can't also, to our last point here, is we can't also be so worried about the future and future outcomes, right? So far we got dealing with the external people in our environment, right? We can't control what they do. We can't always control our internal thoughts and what happens in our brain sometimes. We can't control past results, right? But we also can't control the future. We can't control what's going to happen, what's the outcome going to be. We can't always control that. To a certain extent, we have some things that we can control, but overall, in the end, we can't control the result of a game.
Yeah.
Right? And so worrying about the outcome and trying to live in the future and what's going to happen or what could be or what if this happens, if you start reacting to that, that's only going to affect your confidence now. If you start worrying about, oh my God, what if we lose? What if I miss that goal? What if I miss that penalty? That's going to crush your confidence in the moment.
Yeah. You know, it goes back to the example of the team that beats you. Right. So if that team beat you in the past, doesn't mean that team's going to beat you in the future.
Right.
You know, so controlling the future is difficult. We would all like to control the future, right? Because when we set goals or we have plans for the future, we all want them to work out. But
yeah, I would say it's impossible, not difficult.
You know, and sometimes you get to those goals, but it just takes a different direction.
Right.
You know, and that's sometimes the case in football. You know, you want to get to a goal or you want to get to a certain level, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe you injure yourself or you have a family issue and you can't play for a while. Whatever reason it is, but that doesn't mean that your future is on the line. So that means,
right.
You know, it doesn't mean that you're not going to reach your goal. But the most important thing is control the moment, control now what you can.
Right.
And whatever you put into today, you know, the future will allow you an opportunity to reach your goals or whatever you desire to do.
Yeah.
I'm a massive
100%.
believer in that.
Yeah. It's about controlling right now, right? You can't worry about it. And going back to the example of a player in a match, you can't worry about, you know, what's going to be the final score. When you start the game, you can't be thinking, all right, what's going to be the final score today? Are we going to win? Are we going to lose? You can't go into a match that way because that's just going to affect how you feel about the moment. And you can't even control what's going to happen anyway, right? You don't know what's going to happen throughout a match. You don't know what the referee is going to do. Like we talked about, you don't know, you're going to end up with a player less or the other team's going to end up with a player. You don't know what's going to happen. So because you can't control that stuff, you shouldn't worry about it. You shouldn't even think about it, right? Just control what you can control, which is in the moment right now. That's it. You can't live in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And just also always be wary that what the decisions you make now can have an effect in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the best way to think about the future. If you're going to think about the future, think about what you're doing now and what you can do now to help your future.
Yeah, exactly. So an example is if you set yourself a goal of training every single day for half an hour or an hour, And, you know, there's certain days that you can't be bothered to do it, but you do it. You have to know that your future, you know, there's gonna be a reward at the end of that.
Right.
However big or however small it is, you know.
That's a great example. That's a great example. Yeah, exactly. So if you don't feel like training today, but you focus on just doing it and getting your training in today anyway, that's going to have an effect on your future one way or another.
Exactly.
Right.
Definitely.
Great way to put it. I love that example. And so for our players watching out there, that's something that maybe you should start thinking about. What can I do today to get better tomorrow, right? And I always try to tell my players that, you know, every action has a consequence. Yeah. Whether it's a good or a bad consequence, it doesn't matter, but every action has a consequence. So whether you choose to train today, that's going to have a good consequence on your game. If you choose not to train today, well, that's going to have the opposite, right? So always think about that as a player. What you do today will have a consequence tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that. Couldn't have put it better myself.
There we go. So I guess to recap our thoughts here as we start to wrap up. So we have the main theme is really about players and being able to control and focus on the things that they can control, focus on themselves, right? Because we have so many things that can come up that can affect us if we let them, right? And if we start thinking about things that we can't control, such as the external, right, environment, the parents in the stands, the coaches on the sidelines, the referees in a match, right? We can't control what other people will do, say, think, feel. We can't control their actions. Since we can't control their actions, we shouldn't worry about it, right? We should just worry about us and how we react to the people around us. And Coach Leo, stop me if you have any additional thoughts in any of these places. And then we have the internal thoughts. We have the external, but we also have the internal battle that we have in our brains, all those thoughts that come up. You know, we can choose to let those thoughts control us, or we can just understand that sometimes thoughts are just going to happen and we can't control it. So we can just choose to avoid the negative ones, don't listen to all the negative things all the time, and just choose to listen to the positive thoughts that come in. Because one way or another, we all have good thoughts, we all have bad thoughts. You can't control sometimes what happens in your brain, right? And another uncontrollable is past results. Things that have happened in the past, you can't control. So don't let them affect right now, right? Don't let them affect what you're currently doing. And the last piece was, we also can't control the outcomes of the future, right? The outcomes of a match, for example. So we shouldn't think about that and let that affect right now. We can only control what we can do in the moment. So I think being in the moment is a really big key for players to stay within their zone and to keep their confidence.
100%. Completely agree with everything you just said, Coach Fernando.
Oh, I love when you agree with me, Coach Leo. Makes me feel so good. So yeah, I mean that's the main theme, guys. You know, if you're watching out there, it's about thinking about you and thinking about what you can control in any given moment. Because unfortunately, you know, we can't control how other drivers out there are driving, as Coach Leo wonderfully put. So just focus on how you drive and how you react to things. Because in the end, what your future holds is up to you, right? But you have to allow just yourself to control those things.
Yeah, and taking self-responsibility as well.
Yeah.
You know, for the outcome, whether it be good or whether it be a bad outcome. But the more you take responsibility, the more your mindset is going to shift into, do you know what? I am in control of my outcome.
I love that. Absolutely.
So
that's spot on. Taking responsibility. No matter what happens, even for things, and this is going to sound a little weird to say, but even for things that maybe weren't all the way your fault or all the way your responsibility, I think it helps if you just build that mindset of taking responsibility anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because when you get into that habit of, okay, that was my responsibility, like you said, you start to understand that there is a lot that you actually can control.
Correct. Yeah. And give you another example. So, and I know this is a very common theme amongst a lot of youth players, and especially club players, in that when there's a specific player who he's not a bad player, but he's not the star of the team, and there's 2 or maybe 3 other players that are way above. What a lot of players tend to do is they have like limited thinking. They're like, right, I will never be like this guy. This guy gets all the attention, he gets all the playing time. We always have to pass him the ball because he can make the difference. So that starts to destruct your confidence, because you start to think to yourself, right, while this player is on the team, I've got no chance of being the star. But the truth is, you can control that situation, and you can control it by improving, right? Getting better than that person. And yeah, no doubt that talent, if there's a very, very talented player on your team, maybe you're not going to beat him talent-wise, but you can beat him with work ethic. Okay, you can work harder than him, or you can do certain things that he doesn't do. But it's just a case of observing, taking responsibility, and then taking action.
Wonderfully put. I think that's a beautiful message for players out there, is you can always take responsibility for the player that you become. And one of my main goals, now that you brought this up, one of my main goals with my academy and my players is having players take self-responsibility. Because I always make sure I tell parents that end up joining and training with us, is that at the end of the day, the player that your child becomes, or the player that you become, is ultimately up to your son or your daughter. It's not up to me. It's not up to you. It's up to them, right? They need to take ownership, right? What I tell them is they need to own their development. It's up to nobody else in the whole entire world, not their club coaches, not their school coaches, not their parents, their families, their whoever. It's up to nobody except them. It's up to them. It's up to the player. And once they understand that and they really internalize that, that's when players see long-term development happen. And they start to see real results come in from personally.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Big point there, Coach. I couldn't agree more there. So, Coach Leo, any other thoughts, or are we sort of wrapping up here?
Yeah, just subscribe to the channel.
How could I forget?
No, in all seriousness, good stuff. Great information. I always learn a lot from you as well. And in a selfish way, this is probably why we create this podcast, right? To learn off each other.
Yeah, I think it gives us an opportunity to bounce ideas and understand, some different things that we could do or learn about. So it's definitely every time we do this, I learn something new, which is great. So a little selfishly, you're right. This is kind of good for us.
But hopefully whoever's watching and they've managed to watch however long of this podcast, get something from it, and you can implement it, right? Because at the end of the day, we give out a lot of information, but as long as you get one little thing that can make a difference, then I think we've done our job as coaches and educators.
Yeah, that's bingo. Guys, if you're out there watching and you watch this far, first of all, thank you. We love you probably. And like Coach Leo just said, take action, right? Think of something that you took out of the video, and how can you apply it to your game or to your school or whatever, to your life somehow. How can it help you become better?
Exactly. Awesome.
Subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, don't forget.
Don't forget. And if you guys have any questions or you want to reach out to us, please do so. We have our contact information here. Coach Leo is not a monster. He's very kind. And myself, I am a monster, but I'm still very kind. So please reach out to us if you guys need and have any questions or need some guidance.
Excellent. All right. Well, Coach Fernando, it's been a pleasure as always, and we'll catch up same time next week.
Let's do it again.